some of that Smithson stuff. So, Teardrop Park, I know you've all heard about it. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen it, but I thought it might be fun to say a little bit more about it, including that's when we're all getting ready to move to New York, except Laura, who stayed here, and I think you won't mind me saying manned the Cambridge office. But Teardrop is a project that we all started together in Cambridge, Laura, Matt, and me, and you can see Paul, although he looks 18 and he probably was 23 or something in that photograph, and Matt Urbanski, and that, I don't know what I'm doing. I do not urinate in parks, so I just want, well, I do in bathrooms, but that's not what was going on there. But we had this crazy thing happen, which is a client, we were hired to design this park, and the guy that runs Battery Park City said to us, the site's 1.8 acres, you have to understand. He said, you know, I grew up upstate and I live in the city now, and I think it would be great to make a place that captures the wildness of upstate New York. And, you know, trying not to like gasp and say, well, you know, there's a park north of here, 900 acres, where somebody did that really well 150 years ago. But, you know, I'm not going to, I might have said that when I was 40 or 49, but I wouldn't have said it when I was 50. So we just were like, you know, wow, like it's great that he trusts us to do something like that. Maybe since we are all going to move to New York next year, or the group that's here moved to New York, maybe we ought to figure out who this Olmsted guy is and go over there and look around. And I don't know, it was like an artist who didn't go in the room where Caravaggio was, and you're like, you dumb bastard, like, why did you not go look at this sooner? You know, it's like this guy actually has something going for himself. The other thing, that's where the site of Teardrop is, and of course that's pre 9/11. At earlier, like 10 years earlier, Susan Child and Mary Miss and working with Susan was Doug Reed of Reed Hildebrandt, created a project that I couldn't stop thinking about. Like I thought it was wrong. I thought, well, they brought all these rocks in and they laid them around but it moved me. It was like, shut up, shut up, shut up. Like there's something that I really like that's going on here. So I also want to say that Teardrop is as much, I guess homage is the wrong word, but we see it as a first cousin of something that group of people started. And what was it that I liked about it? It's enigmatic to me. And it doesn't ever make you think that it thought that it was creating a natural landscape, but it was not embarrassed to interpret that and abstract it and to bring some of the power in an artful way into an urban context. So I think it's a really unsung project, and I think Susan is also under-recognized in terms of what her body of work was. So this is the site. It's a fill site in the in the Hudson River. A lot of the material was dug out when they did the excavation for the trade towers and the subways, and so this was before environmental regulation as we know it today. So they made a place to make some money in New York City called Battery Park City. And we were involved in the project before any of the buildings. This is Murray Street here. This is Warren Street, and this is Murray and North End Avenue. And so it was just a big open area. And when we were designing, these buildings were not constructed. So it was a very interesting opportunity, and part of the early education of the firm of a sort of a different role for the landscape architect of not just designing parks and gardens, and I don't mean to make that sound diminishing, but I should say also being involved in the conception of the larger urban condition, which is what a lot of the work has gone on to be. So that's the build out. That's ground zero. And we were actually under construction when 9/11 happened. This is now the Goldman Sachs building, so there's an enormous building here right now. And so we're deep inside of these buildings, and that's looking down inside. This was a real fork in the road for our office in terms of the involvement of technology in our work on a number of levels. John Swallow, I meant to also recognize this soil scientist, John Swallow, who I don't think you worked on this one, but you've worked on so many. This one too. I guess we had a few people work on this one in that department, actually. But John has been a huge hand in the manufacturing of soils in our project. So a couple of things. Microclimate became a defining condition here. And Battery Park City has if you know Tessa Huxley and T. Fleischer, you'll appreciate me using the word rabid, a rabid approach to sustainability. And Battery Park City had the people who were going to maintain the landscape involved and at the design table from absolutely the first time we met. And they did not like us at first. I had to get the farm boy story out and talk about my degree from the Cornell Ag School and, get that stuff going. But we have become just immeasurably good friends. But they said to us, there will be no pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, or non-organic fertilizers, and there are practically no fertilizers at all. And if you want to have a long lawn, which the design people had, you have to show us that you have to measure how much sunlight will be in there when there is the build-out of the surrounding buildings, and you have to have 3.5 hours of sunlight on the equinox, or we're not going to let you have a lawn there, blah, 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 blah. So it was an incredible uphill battle. Lawn is such an incredibly important condition in cities because of the intensity of use that we're subject to. So this really interesting thing happened. We started working with Jamie Carpenter and David Norris, who have a company that do illumination studies for museums. And we hired them to do an illumination study of an outdoor space. And it was interesting that as this building was designed, this building got taller and took out a critical hour of sunlight at the equinox. And if you count it up, 1, 2, 3, you can see that with losing this, we were perilously close to a condition where there was not enough light in the space to have turf. So Laura, who has a love of subconsultants and other things as well, hired not one turf consultant, but another one. What was his name? What was his name? Knit? Was it Knit? Andy. So this guy makes a living figuring out the lawn where those stadiums open and close. So sometimes these lawns are, so he's really researching very state-of-the-art grasses that can live. They're hybridizing, they're getting plants and really creating technologically grass species that can live in that condition. I'm only going to show one side of this, but that also led us to a later space that we designed to the south called Teardrop South, where we also incorporated for the first time in outdoor spaces on the East Coast reflective heliostats, which track the sun with a simple computer program and throw sunlight into dark spaces. So these guys are working on their tan. Actually, this is Nicholas Pevsner, who works in our office, and I don't know who that is with him, but They look like they're having fun. So here you can see the basic idea of Teardrop. Towards us is, so you can see where the old sun diagram was, and then the sun is coming to the north end of the space because the sun is to the south, and then everything to the south, which is largely in shadow, is where we put all the play areas for kids, because kids overheat and sun's not that great for kids. So that's the major divide. But the other dividing factor is that the site, of course, had to be completely ADA compliant, meaning that wheelchairs, and our interpretation of that was that a person in a wheelchair could get to every part of the park without using, obviously, an elevator, but not having to use any areas where there are handrails and, this condition, where if you're in a wheelchair, you basically have metal railings at your side. So that's a 5% slope, which is 1 in 20. And what the wall, one of my, I'm thinking about Stewardia questions in Teardrop was that I want to make a big wall of bluestone, because if there's one thing that I think upstate is about, and that President Carey would want the kids of New York City to experience, is a big wall of bluestone. So it's just kind of like vaguely selfish idea, honestly. So I was always like trying to force that wall into the project. And what Matt and Laura and others realized was that this actually gave us a chance to create a promontory and a turnaround for wheelchairs. In other words, if you went up from the other side to a hill that was here and had to get down to the other side, the entire thing would be one experience as a landscape. So we made half of a hill and we cut it in half with the wall. So everybody walks up, turns around, and comes back, or navigates in other ways. So it wasn't a good look, but I thought I'd share it with you. We're always interested in scale, and this is actually below the photograph at the beginning. This is the same area, but we were really interested in making a tunnel. Where we went in the response to the design challenge by the client was to say, you have to somehow believably encapsulate and miniaturize pieces of the larger New York State landscape, but how do you make the segues between the transitions something more than like one of those salad bars where you're grabbing carrots and meatballs, So we had this idea of actually cutting through the stone wall, but, well, first of all, these guys had already done the stone wall so well that we decided to execute it out of concrete. But it is definitely has a reciprocity to what's going on in Central Park. So Barbara, I did not know you were going to be here, but this project on the top, on the left, is actually a temporary ice installation that I made for Barbara and Alvin at the house on the vineyard. And this was, on the right, was something that I did at Radcliffe back in the 80s. The other thing that I wanted to jam down the throat of this project was ice. I wanted a bluestone wall and I wanted ice. God damn it, I'm going to have that. So like the staff are rolling their eyes and, I guess we're going to have to do this kind of thing. But I grew up in the Catskills, and every place a highway cuts through stone, the groundwater is expressed and there are these ice formations. So that's actually really near my grandparents' house. So we decided to build that in to that grade change. But the thing about it is that the wall and the topography also houses the place behind it where all the green equipment is located. Like we have water that we use from the nearby buildings, and our play area water is captured and treated and recirculated. So it's it's a long time ago now. We started the design of this in 1999, and the project was completed in 2006 or something, but we've been tinkering with it sort of all the way through. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, and I guess this comes out of the fact that, the guy on the top could be my dad. It could not be me. That's me with my hands in my pocket. But we have developed in our practice, and it comes out of my trust of materials, a way of working with people that use landscape materials that's much more like a collaboration. So even though we had a great deal to do with the actual description of the wall, the making of the wall here is actually happening in a quarry with the quarry owner and his son making a huge number of decisions along the way. Like, we did not, for example, describe specifically that piece of stone. There were limits, minimum and maximum and parameters, but then it was all completely negotiated and working with as opposed to working for, in terms of our relationship with craftsmen. Because, I think the thing that made landscape so awkward in the 20th century is that people wanted landscape architecture to conform to the kind of aesthetic guidelines of contemporary architecture. But landscape is, that's like a gorilla in a tuxedo. It's sort of like, it's nice. I like a lot of modern landscape architecture, but to me, it's not the power of landscape to see it contained that way. So this also, by the way, was a way of subverting the unions in New York City. Because if we had made the wall on site, then they would have been the one, like this guy, Bruce, basically has been putting stone together for 65 years. So all of that beautiful decision about joint lines and color happened, and then the union put the stone up. So anyway, just showing you some images of that. We also worked with, she passed away, but we worked with Betsy Hayden, and Betsy and Hayden Hillsgrove, and they were actually hired by our clients to be there every day that work with the stone was going on. So these were also not drawings that we created, although some combination of Laura, Matt, myself, Paul, and others picked and tagged all the stone in the quarry. But the composition of this area was actually something that we negotiated, all three of us, interchangeably with Betsy when she was on the site. This, by the way, is a soft fall surface, so these are hard things, but hard stone, but we conform to all of the guidelines for safety surfaces, and it's just an incredibly popular little play area. We just decided if we were going to have a slide, it had to be a really good one, and trust me, this one is.